everybody, it's Miranda and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be talking about the second step of my writing process, which is outlining. As I mentioned in my previous writing process video, I am definitely more of a planner than a pantser. So if you're more of somebody who has to plot out all your stuff for your story, then this is definitely the video that you should watch. For me, the benefit of outlining is that it helps prevent writer's block. So the more detailed that you make your outline for your story, the less likely it is that you're going to hit a sort of a roadblock in your creativity, because you'll always have that outline there that you can refer back to continue your story. So last video we also talked about the 5 whys of planning your novel. We got who, what, when, where, and why. This outlining phase now is going to answer the how of your novel. How does your character get from point A to point B to point C, and so on and so forth. I'm going to be showing you guys 2 different ways that you can outline your story to help make your novel the best that it can be. So the first method that I use is actually a pretty short and simple method. It is very basic, and I tend to use this for shorter novels or more short stories than I do for my full-length ones, because it doesn't require as much detail if you're still kind of working it out and you want to figure all that out on your first draft. And pretty much what it is this outline that one of the ones that I can make, it includes your characters' names and then as a list, and then this is where you really start to think about what your character looks like and some personality traits. Now if you did this in the planning step, then you don't have to do it on this version of the outline. You can just skip right on to the next part of the outline. Okay, so then the next thing that you do once you've thought of your characters and a little bit more about them, like I said, they don't have to be fully developed if you don't want them to be yet. For me, my characters tend to develop as I write my first draft, and for you it may be the same thing. But the next step that you're going to do is you're going to want to start to define the beginning, the middle, and the end of your story. So you're going to start at the beginning of your book, the beginning, which is usually the exposition and the rising action, thereabouts. And you talk about the different steps that happen in your beginning, the beginning of your book. So for example, you would say something like, okay, so the beginning is going to be about defining the setting and talking about getting to know our main character. It can be as simple as that, or it can be, you can list it out as detailed as you want it to be. That way you can remember it. Like I said, the more detailed your outline is, the less likely you are going to come in contact with writer's block. So once you thought of your beginning step, your next step is going to be the middle of your book. So this can incorporate a little bit of rising action and your climax, and then the start of your falling action. So the middle of your story, you're going to say, okay, so now you've talked about how your character goes on this journey, and now they encounter the different main key points that are going to happen in your story. And if you don't know that yet, take some time to think about it, because this is really going to help you when you move into your first draft. That way you don't get stuck. The middle step usually takes the longest, because ideally you're detailing every single part of the middle of your book. You're writing down the details of the journey, some of the details of the different places that they go, maybe a few important conversations that you want your character to have, maybe some revelations that happen in your story, and of course you want to share the climax of your story as well. And then moving into just the ending. So you're going to do, maybe now that they've gone on this journey, you're going to say like them coming home, what their reward was, if there even was one, and sort of maybe like what happened to them afterwards, if you care about that. If not, it's really up to you. And you can apply this to any genre. It doesn't have to be fantasy. I tend to use fantasy as an example because I'm more experienced in writing fantasy than any other genre. But yes, you can apply this to any genre. So that was the first step. That was the first kind of outline, and I'll show a picture of it to you guys. that is what it'll look like when it is all done, ideally. Kind of a template that you can follow to fill it out. And the one that I just showed you is an example from a long time ago. Okay, so the next method that I use for my story is for my novels. And this is really, this takes a long time to do an outline. I'd say maybe a few weeks at most. It could take as long as a few months, depending on how, like I said, depending on how detailed it is. But the more detailed it is, the easier it is for you to get through your first draft and to avoid any writer's blocks. So the method that I use for writing my novels is where I take, instead of defining characters and putting in beginning, middle, and end, I simply just plot out every single individual plot of the story. So I literally say things like, Lyra wakes up in the morning, Lyra goes to school, Lyra gets in a fight at school, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. That is how every single scene goes together. Sometimes I'll even write out dialogue. And I guess this is arguably like the rough first draft, but honestly, it's just an outline because I add all of those little scene transitions in between, and it makes it a lot better. Let me show you what a completed one looks like. Okay, so this plotting of different scenes of the story that I do, I call it events, and I always number those events. That way I can kind of keep track of how many of them there are, and that way it's easier for me to then transfer them onto an outline. So I will show you how thick a plotted event book will be. About yay thick. There is a total of 692 events that happened in the rough draft of SOHCAHTOA. And like I said, mostly I detailed everything that she did from the beginning, and I detailed all of her dialogue, all of her thoughts, all of the different scenes that happen in each village. And then I simply, when I was done writing out the events, it was easier for me to then bracket those events into chapters. That way I could better define what was going to happen in the first chapter, what was going to happen in the next chapter, and then it just made it easier for my rough draft, and it made it easier for me to break my novel into pieces so that way I could then focus on one chapter. So an example would be in the first chapter there are a total of 13 events. It's mostly Lyra going to school and then meeting the Black Wolf, which happens in the book. And then it goes into, and that's just the first chapter. And you'll find that as you're writing your story, if you want to expand on what you wrote in your outline in your first draft, then that's fine. You're totally okay to deviate away from your outline, but anyway, once I got these events for my story written, I then moved into actually outlining those events, and that made it a lot easier for me to do it. Once I had the events of the story written out, it made it easier for me to outline it. So I actually added events in here that wasn't in the original thing that I put in the outline. And then like I said, I broke the story up into chapters, and I kind of wrote out what was going to happen in each chapter based off of the events that I'd written originally and stuff that I wanted to add to the story. And this just made it a whole lot easier for me. I will share with you guys a photo of the first page of each one, that way you can kind of see what it looks like. But this is the rough draft of SOHCAHTOA. This isn't the final draft, as you may tell that this deviated a little bit. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. Like I said, there are two different ways that you could do it. You could do it a shorter way if you really don't have. I recommend the first method with the beginning, middle, and end if you're still not really sure about where you're going with your novel, if you want to leave room for growth or expansion. The outlining is the second method that I just showed you, is more of if you know like how you want your story to go from beginning to end. So you can also, and the outlining step of this takes a lot longer than the planning. The first step of my writing process usually takes about maybe 5 minutes to an hour to do. but the outlining phase takes a lot longer. So it's not something that's going to happen in a day usually. It usually takes about a couple of weeks, maybe a few months, depending on how detailed your outlining is. And when I went into something like the Curse of Sokotoa, I did not have my characters fully fleshed out yet. That all happened as I wrote the story and as I revised it and eventually moved into the final draft. But that's all I'm going to share for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you found it a little bit helpful for you to kind of get started on your draft and not get stuck on it. And I will see you guys soon with another video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel if you're interested in seeing more content like this, or if you want to see more of this series. And if you're looking for something new to read, then feel free to check out my book, The Curse of Sokotoa, which I will leave linked down below. Thank you guys so much for watching.